there's going to be questions on whether it was wasted, was it spent on family? But when we look at there's a portion of our wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated that is not ours. He's given it to us for our safekeeping. And that's due upon a particular group of people who are eligible for it. And this is where a true test of faith comes when we look at, are we able to kind of not get attached to this part of the wealth that's been given to us? So we'll go all about zakat as a pillar. We'll discuss the wisdom. Why is zakat a pillar? Why isn't sadaqah a pillar? We'll talk about some of the statements of previous scholars, the wisdoms. We'll go into the calculation. So how is zakat calculated? What assets is it calculated on? Are there any deductions that can be made on our zakat obligations? The question of gold always gets asked. What if I wear it? What if I don't wear it? It's always a question the sisters have. Missed zakat. So what if you calculated zakat incorrectly? So what if zakat, you looked back and realized, I made mistakes. I didn't know zakat was due on this asset, or I didn't know zakat was calculated with this percentage. How do I calculate missed zakat? Is it due upon me? When is it due upon me? We'll go through some, and then the local impact of zakat. So the famous hadith where Mu'adh bin Jabal was instructed to go to the people of Yemen and to take from their rich and give to their poor. Very clear instructions. Collect from their rich and then distribute to their poor. And what this tells us is that zakat, its first right is on the locality from the people where it's taken from. Right? And then the scholars have a framework of how, if the need is met, then we expand the radius. And we see applications of this throughout our history. We see the story of the great-grandson of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, when he was the Khalifa, and zakat was going from one region to another region, and it would come back to the original region because it wasn't in need in the other parts. And this is when zakat was upheld as a pillar, and we had a strong community. And then finally, we'll talk about some cases we've had here in Australia and how your zakat has transformed people's lives. When the system in Australia is not helping the brothers in need and sisters in need, especially those who are coming from Gaza. There's a lot of brothers and sisters that have come here from Gaza who've got specific needs, and they can't be met with local infrastructure and support. So we'll talk about the impact this is having on those families. And finally, we'll go through Q&A. So first of all, importance of zakat. Right? Zakat is not simply a good deed or a sign of righteousness. Rather, it has been made into a pillar of the religion itself. What does it mean to be a pillar? What is the function of a pillar? When we have a building and we're looking at pillars, what is the function of a pillar? It's a foundation. It upholds, right? And if one of the pillars is removed, it can weaken the whole foundation. Right? The other thing a pillar does is it connects from one to the other. A pillar has a direct connection. So when we collect zakat and then we distribute zakat, we are directly connecting with the recipient and transforming their life. And we see this documented through the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, when people were given zakat, and when the Sahaba were looking after the orphans, they would see the impact of zakat. We were connecting. Worship is being connected within the community. Another interesting analogy I've heard recently regarding zakat and the wisdom of it being a pillar is that, and this is a bit of a deeper example. How many of you guys have played chess? Yep, you played chess. Okay. You guys know what grandmasters are in chess? Okay. So a chess grandmaster is probably the highest rank when it comes to a chess player, right? They play on the world stage, very intelligent, very strategic, and almost like they've dedicated their life to chess. And these grandmasters, one thing they mention when they talk about it in their books on chess strategy and so on, is the chessboard has 64 pieces, right? And the objective of the game is to capture the king of the opposing team, right? And there's strategy, there's strategic moves that are made on the board. Now, the grandmasters will say that the most important parts of the map of the board are the four central pieces. The four central pieces. If you control that, you control the map, you control the game. And it's been mentioned, and it's been kind of there's been a modern analogy I've heard recently, with upholding zakat is like having control of the middle, right? Within the community space, right? So when you look at particular communities out there, they seem so strong. They're small in number. They've got influence in government, influence in politics, influence in policy change, right? And they are wealthy. They use their money collectively to change society. And we all know who I'm talking about, right? This particular group of this community is very strong financially. But do they have more money than the Muslims? I don't think so, right? If you look at the data, the amount of money Muslims have is far greater. Yet we're so weak because we don't work collectively. We don't work as one ummah. And as a result, we have no strategy. When you start upholding zakat, you start to realize that zakat is that pillar. It's having control of the middle of the map, right? It gives us control. It makes us think long term. Chess players, these grandmasters, they're not thinking of the next three moves. They're working backwards from the victory. They've already planned out how they're going to win, and they're working backwards from that, so where they need to work. A very different way of thinking. Unfortunately, the Muslim community is very reactive. And we see this time and time again. We get baited. We fall into their traps. And then things get more difficult for Muslims. Right now, how many masjids are being shut down? The laws have been passed. The council has the power to shut any community center, any community hall that's been used for prayer. And I heard recently from one of the brothers who works in that within the council, and he's seen this on the table, right, in the office, a list of 87 masjids or community centers that are in the queue to be processed, whether they'll be shut down or not. We used to think, no, in the future we need to have infrastructure, we need to have systems that support and strengthen the Muslims. So we would always be blind to this, and we would be sending our money overseas. Millions of dollars are being sent overseas. But the time is affecting us now. We used to think, oh, we need to set up the infrastructure for our children. We need to set this up for our children in the future. It's happening now. It's affecting us now. Masjids are being shut down everywhere. It's getting more and more difficult to get places of worship. And we're not being strategic enough. And this is the wisdom of zakat. When we start really thinking about zakat, right? And it's proper implementation and application. Recently, I joined NZF recently, and I'll go through a bit of my background. Alhamdulillah, I grew up in Southwest Sydney. So born and raised in Australia. I grew up, I went to Al Nouri, and then afterwards we moved down to Southwest Sydney in Kasula when I was 2 years old. And I've gone through the schooling system, both public, both private, and I've seen the changes we've had in our community over the 90s and 2000s. My father was born in Australia as well. My great-grandfather my grandfather moved to Australia in the 50s, but we've had a long history in Australia since the 1880s. And what you start to see is when my great-grandfather came to Australia and he decided to make this into a home, the first thing they usually did, and we see in Adelaide, the first masjid that was established by the Kamalis. If you go to that masjid now, it's a heritage site now, it's preserved, right? And you start thinking, okay, those individuals that were coming to Australia, at the time, politically around the world, there was a lot of turmoil, not much different to what's happening now. So they would escape, they would leave for a better life, but they would always have their heart connected to their family, right? Which is rightly so. They've come from an environment where they're struggling, their family might be in a difficult situation, and we all might have that same story. Maybe not from the 1880s, maybe more recently, in the last generation or the 2 generations. And what we see is that they would always be sending money back home, and we might even do this now because you might have relatives that are in need. You know that poverty there is very different. They might only be eating 1 meal a day, And that could be just bread, right? Bread and some maybe lentils or something like that. And they might not even see meat for months. Maybe only on Eid they see meat. So we've seen poverty overseas. And we've always been, sending money back home, sending this back overseas. But over the years, the Muslim community has grown so rapidly in the last 50 years in Australia. We're starting to see the needs grow within Australia. And those communities that came over from 50 years ago, 80 years ago, they developed the infrastructure. They've developed themselves strongly within the community and entrenched themselves within the fabric of Australian society. But they're also struggling when it comes to our identity. What does it mean to be an Australian Muslim? Right? Many of us who were born here, our children are born here, we may have been born here. We don't feel like we're at home overseas, do we? Right? You go back overseas and you're seen as an outsider, foreigner. And you're here sometimes and you also feel like a foreigner, right? So we're in a situation where where is home, right? And it's only when we accept that no, we can't all make hijrah. Can 1 million Muslims pack up and go overseas? It's not possible. So yes, there's many people who will talk about the importance of hijrah, but on a practical level, is that possible, right? Are we going to be able to flourish over there like we are here? And to flourish over here, we need to start thinking long term now. We need to remove this baggage of overseas. No doubt, help people overseas. We can give our sadaqah overseas. But zakat, first and foremost, is an obligation to the people around us. And then when you start digging deeper into zakat as a pillar, you start seeing wisdoms that will just amaze you. And my journey with NZF recently, I was there with NZF when it first started with Brother Ismail. I was just a volunteer back then. Back then, we were actually distributing the food to the actual recipients. Now we've changed all of the systems because we have so many cases that we see on a day-to-day basis. But the transformation within NZF I've seen has been amazing. And when we look at the 5 pillars of Islam, everything is very precise, right? The kalima, very precise set of words. And that shows you that now you're a Muslim. The second pillar, salah. I can't change anything about salah. I can't say for Fajr, I want to pray 3 because heck, I want to pray 3, right? For Dhuhr, I can't say I want to pray 6. It's prescribed at a specific time, within a specific window of time, and a specific set of units, with a specific set of actions. Very precise, right? When we see fasting, likewise, it's very prescriptive. It's during the month of Ramadan. It's during a set amount of hours, right? There's specific rules of what breaks it. Very precise. And then we look at Hajj. Likewise, I can't say I want to go to Hajj on the 17th of Ramadan or the 12th of Shaban. It's specific dates of Dhul Hijjah. And not even the first of Dhul Hijjah. Right? Specific dates. A prescriptive set of actions. You do these actions and your Hajj is complete. You don't do these actions, your Hajj is not complete. So when we look at all of these pillars, they're very precise. But for many of us, zakat doesn't seem precise. We just 2.5%. 2.5% of what? The wealth I have now, the money in my bank account, the gold I have, the assets I own. We don't really think deep enough and realize it's actually more precise than all of the other pillars. Our dear brother Ismail Davids, sometimes he would go and help brothers and sisters calculate their zakat. And then they'll come back and they'll be like, here's my zakat down to the cent. $566.13 or 15 cents. And then he goes, why do you give it exact and not round it up? Because it's exact, right? I mean, better off to round it up, right? No harm. But it is very precise, the calculation of zakat. And it's important that we learn about this because it's so integral to our faith. Secondly, zakat is the right of the poor in our wealth, ordained by the true owner of the wealth, Allah the Most High. Right? It has been specified and the amount that is due has been clarified and not left to our individual guessing. Allah has entrusted and made responsible the highest leadership to order and ensure the pillar of zakat is enacted. It is thus enforced from the highest means. And remember, It's not about who is poorer or needier, but whose right it is. Right? And this is the most important thing you need to take home. It's not based on who we think is in more need of it, rather whose right is it first. We'll go through some of the consequences. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I know we all want to get into some of the cases and the calculations. But again, many times we would have heard the serious consequences of not paying zakat. We'll go through that shortly. We'll also talk about the 8 specific recipients. So who is entitled to receive our zakat? Again, it's not left to chance. There's, in Surah Tawbah, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala mentions the 8 categories of the recipients of zakat. And rather, the intention behind it is not merely to decrease the burden of difficulty of poverty, right? Rather, it's to attack poverty itself. So, and help the poor become self-sufficient. So when we talk about Umar's way, Umar would give out zakat so that that person who is receiving it is now sufficed for the whole year. Right? Very generous. Because when you look at a person when they're in a state of poverty and they're struggling to make ends meet, they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're in rental arrears, they're worried they're going to get evicted, they're worried about getting the next meal for their children, right? And really just think about it for a second, right? And may Allah protect us from this situation. But for those who may have been in that situation, can relate to it. When we look at this and we think about if we were in this situation today and you're worried, and we've had cases like this, a brother may have had a very stable job to become redundant. And it's been now months, he's struggling to find work, right? Again, he's got assets. Alhamdulillah, he's got a house. His kids go to school. But now, slowly over time, he's creeping into a situation where he can fall into a state of need, right? And this is one of the recipients, those who are needy. They're capable of working. It's not like they're not capable. They're incapacitated or they've got a disability where they can't work. They're strong, they're able to work, but now something's happened and they're in a situation where they're in need and now they're qualified. Islam has a support system for this. A brother of mine, I went to school with, university with, he, from a Hindu family. And this particular brother, throughout year 8, year 9, he started questioning a lot about faith and about religion. And he went through this journey where he would hear the Muslims, he used to go to Birang Boys, and the Muslim boys in the school would always mock him sometimes, but they were very polite, the other ones. And he would see different types of Muslims, and he would start critiquing them. How can you believe in a God? Are you stupid? Doesn't make sense. He was very rational, he thought to himself, very scientific, a man of science. He didn't believe in his own faith either, although his parents are Hindu. And as he would start questioning things, he went through this crisis where he would start learning about different faiths. He would learn about his own faith, he would learn about Christianity. And one of the brothers, an Indonesian brother, right? MashaAllah, may Allah reward the brothers. This particular brother, he said, like, why are you being silly and just, goosing around looking, hey, take a copy of the Quran, right? And he had no intention to read it. My friend's like, when he gave me this book, no intention to read this book. But he goes, I took it. And then for weeks, maybe months, he was studying, learning, studying Buddhism, studying Christianity, all the different faiths out there. And he's really getting into a situation where he's got these doubts now. Outwardly, he's projecting this strong arrogance. Who are you to believe in God? But when he's back home, he goes, I was feeling scared. I don't know, like, I need to know. And as he was going through this journey, he mentions he decided to pull the Quran off the shelf. And he goes, I just opened it randomly. And the first verse that I read, it addressed the question that I had in my heart. Because I started to shake. I got worried. This can't be coincidence. So he just turned a few pages and he had a rebuttal, right? He already thought of a rebuttal through this verse. So when he turned the page, his rebuttal was answered again. And he goes, that's the moment I realized, and I broke down in tears, that this is the truth, right? Now, this particular brother, right? I actually only met him later on when I started university. And he told me who the brother was that gave him the Quran. And I remember I heard his name, and he goes, There's an Indonesian brother. What's his name? I've heard that name before. And this particular brother that he mentioned was actually my friend in kindergarten. That I left the school. I left Al Nuri at the time. I moved to Kasula, right? And I hadn't seen him since kindergarten. And it was the same brother that gave him that dawah. SubhanAllah, right? It's a nice story just to see like how I connected with this brother again. But he would then go through this difficulty throughout high school where he would have to pray in the bathroom, right? He would have the copy of the Quran. His parents were getting a bit concerned. His behaviors changed. He'd leave early because he quickly ate. He wanted to fast. He left for school early, and he said, "I'm not hungry." And then when he got home, he'd try to delay it. I had to go to the library. Had to study with friends, so he'd delay himself getting home, and then he'd eat whatever was made at the time of Maghrib. And then his lunch that his mom made, he would keep in his bag. So in the morning, he could wake up 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and eat it. He did this for 7 years. 7 years. And when his parents found out, what do you think happened? They disowned him, right? Kicked him out of the house. How many other cases are there like this, right? Who's going to support these brothers? And you find that these individuals, they are a recipient. They're one of the categories of those who are eligible for receiving zakat. It's frozen. Second. Okay, we'll get into the 8 recipients. So in Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the first category is the poor, second, the needy, 3, to those who work on administering a zakat, number 4, for bringing hearts together, number 5, to free those in bondage, number 6, for those in debt, number 7, for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and number 8, for the stranded traveler. Which one of these categories today do you think is not applicable in Australia? Yeah. Well, this is from the Quran, right? These are the 8 recipients, right? But are there any of these recipients that are not here in Australia right now? We probably would agree that poor, there's always going to be poor, right? There's needy, right? And those who are working in the administration of zakat, so zakat officers, right? Bringing hearts together. Yep. So these are the new Muslims or those who are inclined towards Islam, right? Right. Um, those in debt, people can get in debt. They could get scammed. They owed someone money. Genuine need. They got in debt. There's students who are overseas and they're struggling with debt. For the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is typically in classical Islam referred to in terms of jihad, right? Fighting for the cause of Allah and for the stranded traveler. So number 7, probably. And number 5, are there any people in bondage today? What does bondage mean? The captives? Yeah, the captives, prisoners of war. Prisoners of war. Could this expand into those Muslims who've been unjustly wronged unjustly and put into prison? It could possibly, right? The scholars talk about whether we can extrapolate out towards that. So it's not the classical side of someone's been taken as a captive, right? And they're sold into slavery. But there's other forms of bondage. For the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right now, there's a big discussion happening amongst local scholars, international scholars, right? Especially in the West, about whether the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be extrapolated out towards any cause that is preserving the dignity and the identity of Muslims. So when it comes to fighting in the cause of Allah, not in the physical sense, but in the academic and the intellectual space. So can this be used for advocacy? I don't have an answer for this. But again, get you thinking how Islam is applicable for all times, right? So when we're talking about advocacy for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their scholars will say that advocacy is, if we're fighting in parliament, if we're fighting in the media, if we're fighting on these fronts, we've got legal representation, legal bodies, we've got institutions that are funded so that we can have our masjids back. Isn't that for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? So there's a lot to think of. And there's going to be pushback, but we're in a healthy state right now where there's this debate happening amongst the scholarly community, where some are saying, no, we can't change the deen, but others are saying, no, we're not changing the deen, but the times have changed. You know, if we lose the academic war, if we lose the intellectual battle, we'll lose the identity of the Muslims, right? And what's left then? So there is a lot of questioning around that area at the moment. And for the stranded traveler, we see this all the time, right? We had a case where we got a call from a remote part of Australia, a sister, her husband, both of them had came to Australia to work. Husband had passed away. The sister's visa status was unsure. She had no money, and she was stuck in this situation. So she managed to find NZF on the website, online, and we will manage to quickly get some support and get her back to her country, get her back to her parents. So stranded travelers, I mean, back home, they're probably wealthy, they're probably doing well, but they don't have access to to get out of that situation. So stranded travelers are another obligation. And this is all an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who's the all-knowing, the all-wise. And when we start thinking and reflecting about this, we start to really see the wisdoms of why it's these 8 recipients. Importance of zakat for women. So for those who are married, I assume everyone's married here. Do you pay zakat for your wife? Or does your wife pay zakat? And for the sisters, are you paying zakat on your own jewelry? Or is it your husbands that pay for you? Should your husband pay for you? Yes, no? Yes? The husband should pay for the wife's? Isn't zakat a pillar of Islam? So it's an obligation just like the other 4 pillars? Exactly, right? Their property is theirs. If the husband chooses to pay on behalf of that's fine. Yeah, then they can be a good husband. But why do you want to miss out on the rewards, sisters? Right? It's a pillar of Islam. You don't ask your husband to give sadaqah on your behalf. That's optional, right? But sometimes we get used to the husband giving zakat on behalf of the wife. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is, why are we missing out on those rewards? Right? It is a pillar of Islam. It's not just sadaqah. And one of the benefits of that is you're engaging in act of worship when you're paying sadaqah. So when you're paying zakat. And we'll go through it later on. Zakat is mentioned 32 times in the Quran. Right? 32 times the word zakat is mentioned in the Quran. 28 of those times it's mentioned paired up with salat. Waqimu salat wa atu zakat. Always, 28 times it's paired with. Why do you think it's paired with salah and zakat? Maybe someone can answer it. Why do you think it's paired? Why is the salat and zakat paired so many times? Something to think about, right? We might not have the answer right now, but it's something, again, where the first verse that was revealed was Iqra, read, right? Numerous times in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions for us to ponder, to reflect. This is maybe homework for all of us. Start thinking, why is salah and zakat paired mostly in the Quran? There's a reason, there's a wisdom. And this is something that we should be sitting down and thinking about, deeply reflecting. And we're commanded to always reflect, right, on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deeper wisdoms behind it. And I'm sure you'll come up with 30 different wisdoms on your own just by thinking about this. Discuss it with your families. So zakat should be part and parcel of our life, just like salah. Just like we do salah 5 times a day, zakat, we're not paying it 5 times a day. But why is it paired? Right? Because when we're thinking about zakat as a pillar, even though we pay it once a year, it forces us to think through the whole year in terms of how I deal with my money, how I calculate it. Have I dropped below the nisab? You're keeping a log, you're tracking your money. You're becoming financially, what's the word? Astute, right? You're becoming financially aware of your earnings, and you're making sure that you're ready to pay zakat when it's due. So there's another wisdom there. And I'm sure we can come up with hundreds of wisdoms if you all just think about it. Again, another important aspect of zakat for women, and again for men as well, is it helps us increase and purify our wealth. And we'll talk about that portion of what does it mean to purify our wealth. And lastly, it generates love for the religion. So why would we want to miss out on it? So the power of zakat. Do we want to have is there any questions you guys got? I mean, the last session I did, I had to do it between Maghrib and Isha, so it was very condensed. So I had to rush through it. So I didn't really get a chance to interact with the brothers and the sisters. So any questions, feel free to ask. Again, when you're learning about zakat, normally we think finance, we think a dry subject. But when you start learning about it, you realize, hold on, there's so much more to it. It's actually very interesting. And this is what you've come to realize the more we get into this. I mentioned 32 times in the Quran, 28 times it's paired with salah. Now this, which one is this? Again, it demonstrates obviously why zakat. It demonstrates our faith, right? Islam was to testify that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger, and to establish the prayer, pay the zakat, fast Ramadan, and perform Hajj, which are the 5 pillars. There's a famous hadith mentioned, the hadith of Jibreel, where Umar radiallahu anh mentions that it was a very hot day in Medina, and they were sitting inside the masjid. It's too hot to work at that time of the day, so no one's out and about. The situation in Medina was such that the people during the day they'd normally have a nap after Dhuhr because of the heat. And if those who've been to Mecca and Medina in summer, alhamdulillah, I had the opportunity and the blessing of going for Umrah last year, but I ended up going in July, right? The hottest part of the time of the year. And subhanAllah, it's so hot. As soon as you walk out, you sweat straight away, you're drenched in sweat. So you imagine at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there's no air conditioners, there's no fans, right? So they wouldn't do much work during the day. They would have a bit of a nap because it's too difficult. So they're in the masjid. And what happens is a man walked into the masjid, and this man no one could recognize who he was. So they assumed he's a traveler. However, this individual, his hair was groomed, well kept, and his thobe, his garment, was pure white, clean. There was no sign of travel on him. So at the time, if you're not known and you're walking to Medina in the day as well, you're going to have signs of travel. You're going to look a bit disheveled. Your clothes might have a bit of dust and dirt on it. You can have visible signs of this person's traveled. Now, this particular person, pure white clothing, not a sign of struggle and discomfort on him. And he walked into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and he approached the Prophet ﷺ as he was sitting down, and he went down and sat right in front of him, knee to knee. Have you all heard this hadith? May have heard this hadith. A very famous hadith, because long story short, what happens is he asked the Prophet ﷺ a question. Tell me about Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions this. It is, to testify that there's no God but Allah, and the Prophet ﷺ is his messenger, to pray the salah, to pay zakat, right? To fast and to make pilgrimage if possible. And then he said to the Prophet ﷺ, you are correct, right? And the Sahaba watching this, it's like, this is very strange. A random dude walks in, asks a question to the Prophet ﷺ, fair enough, he wants to know. He looks a bit odd, he's very clean, white, and then he says, yes, you're right. And then he asks another question, right? What is Iman, right? And then he mentions it is to believe in, to Allah, His angels, His messengers, His books, right? The Day of Judgment and Qadr. And again, he says, you are correct. And the Sahaba are like, this is what's going on here. This is strange, right? And the third question he asks is, what is Ihsan? MashaAllah, we've got brother Ihsan here. What is Ihsan? And he said it is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see him, even though you don't see him, and you know that he sees you. Right? And this is a principle in Islam that whenever we do something, we do it with excellence. Right? So likewise with zakat, we do it with excellence. And this hadith is very famous because we always tell it to our children. It's always an exciting story for children. Like, oh, who's this man walking in white clothes? It gets them really interested. Why was he sitting so close to the Prophet ﷺ? And it develops a love of the deen in the hearts of children as well. So this again talks about the totality of the religion and how zakat again is a central pillar. Zakat equals wealth, right? So when we think, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, I know we've got a lot to cover, but generally, you know, there's actually a podcast I saw recently where like a non-Muslim is talking about giving charity increases your wealth. I'm not sure if you've heard this. It's a recent thing, and he just talks about, and they use things like the law of attraction and all this sort of stuff, right? But subhanAllah, when we see it from an Islamic perspective, we know that whenever we give something for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases it. And with zakat, it's almost like, I like the example of Ismail Davis always gives of if you've got a glass of milk, I'm not sure if you've heard this example, glass of milk, right? If you put a drop of blue ink in it, what happens to the milk? It corrupts all the milk. It's undrinkable, right? But if you can extract that one drop, what does it do to the rest of the milk? Purifies it, right? So zakat is a purification of our wealth. So that $10,000 we have, right? The moment you take out the 2.5%, you take out the $250, we may think we have less money. Now, if you look at your bank statement, yes, it's less money. But now it's purified. There'll be more barakah in that. Right? And that's the thing that we don't think about. Islam transcends what we see sometimes. And this is where the element of trust comes in, of faith, yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, we might have less money, but I need to pay this bill. I need to do this. I need some money left over. But once you take that portion out, that's not yours anyway. So giving it up is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then the reward is you've purified that wealth. And there's a hadith that's mentioned, which is quite profound, that hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was, I think, getting some food from a bowl, and she was serving it to people. And every time she would serve, she was able to serve a lot of people with this bowl. The only time is when she thought, like, how much do I have left in it? When she tried to find out how much she left in it, then it ran out quicker, right? It's almost like the barakah ran out. And it's mentioned that, when you have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That $9,750 that you have left after giving your zakat will have barakah in that. We may have been in situations, we know people, sometimes they say, as soon as I get paid, I've got all these bills, it never feels like I can get ahead. The money I have has no barakah in it. It comes and goes, no matter how much I make. I make more money, it goes quicker. Right? This could be a sign that perhaps we're missing part of our zakat. Right? We're not paying it in its right proportion. By the way, is zakat 2.5% flat? Is it always 2.5%? That's the golden rule, right? Yeah. We're going to come through the percentages later on, right? There's some things that are the zakat due on it is on 5%, right? Has anyone come across that yet? 5% or 7.5%. And there's also 20%. There's some assets that when we pay zakat on, 20% of it is zakatable. Right? We'll come across that very soon. Right? I thought I had to mention that now just to keep you interested. Right? So zakat purifies, equals purification. So what's the literal meaning of zakat? It's not in the slides, but what do you think the literal meaning of zakat is? If anyone follows our social media, we had a post with Sunny Bill recently where he was asked, what does zakat mean? I think he guessed it, but he got it right. It's to purify. It's the process of removing impurity. So zakat is purification. How is purifying your money and you purifying yourself linked? Question for everyone. I might pick someone randomly. How is purifying your money and you purifying yourself linked? I might pick on the sisters today. So I want an answer from the sisters. So you got, yep. You've got a mic so you can turn it on. How is purifying your money and you purifying yourself linked?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
All right. I believe that just like
Too much echo. Okay. No, go ahead. They can hear. I hope they can hear you. Mm. Yep. Yep. No, I agree. Any other answers? Yep. Yep. So would you say it forces you to think about making sure your earnings are halal? Right? Yeah. Buying and selling halal? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And again, it forces you to think like, am I trying to rip this person off? I'm trying to be fair with this person. And when we link, when we're trying to purify ourselves, wealth is one of the ways we purify ourselves because it shows our sincerity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can rip off that brother. He has no idea what the value of this car is. I can sell it to him for 25,000. I can hide the defect, right? But am I going to feel comfortable, right? Is that wealth going to be halal for me? It should be 15,000, but I've inflated it $10,000 because he doesn't know any better. And we see examples from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ where a Sahaba wanted to buy something and he gave a price, but the Sahaba gave him a lower price. He goes, I was willing to take a higher price for it. He goes, but you didn't know that was a defect in it. So I bought it at a lower price, right? Just because you can get a bargain doesn't mean we should get the bargain. What if, so, and again, it forces us to really think through it, right? And I remember, studying this, back in uni when I was learning about just from a historical perspective, Muslims traditionally, when you look at those communities back home, when we were actually adopting the true essence of buying and selling, in a halal manner, they would look after each other by making sure that they're not ripping each other off. You'd have situations where a brother would have his food stall set up, and at 3 p.m. he packs up and leaves. And a Westerner would say, you could have made more money. Why didn't you leave make more money? He goes, I had enough of what I needed, but I can see my brother at the other store struggling. So I packed up, okay, give him a chance to make some money, right? Can you see the wisdoms, right? When you're purifying yourself and you're linking salah and zakat, 5 times a day we pray. Zakat, we're not paying 5 times a day, but we're always thinking about it. We're trying to be fair in our earnings, and we're looking after each other. It's not a capitalist society. No. What I'll do is okay, he's not selling much. What I'll do then is I'll drop my prices a bit more. I've made enough money, but I'll drop them lower so they don't go to him. I want to take him out of business, right? And when he packs up and leaves, I open up a second stall. Now let's make a monopoly, right? You can see the wisdoms inbuilt into the fabric of our system, of our deen. And this is why it's so powerful when you look at Islam. It is the solution to all the problems. We hear it, but we never think about it, right? Sisters had I heard. So sisters, if you want to go ahead and answer that question, maybe I already answered what you said, but if you got something extra to add.
Bismillah. Yes. I would say that purifying money is linked to purifying myself because of the love for money. So it's like because you want to get rid of that love for money, then it's like purifying your heart.
No, excellent. I never thought about that. It's so true. Because we get attached to money, right? And by implementing zakat and purifying our wealth, it's forcing us and it's to detach ourselves. It's not mine to begin with. Don't get too attached to it. We're not here forever. And again, stops the discourages the hoarding of wealth. Jazakallah khair, sister. Any other ones you want to add before we move on? No, we'll move on. I'll skip this slide because we've talked about how the linguistic side of things and how it means to purify and grow. There's a lot of slides here, so different speakers will spend more time on certain slides. I've gone through this. The slide's there for you, so if you want to take a photo of it, right? But the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal, right? When he was sent to Yemen. So basically what happened is he was sent to Yemen. This is not mentioned in that on the slide right here. But when he was sent to Yemen to collect zakat and distribute zakat, what happened is he came back to Medina with all the money. And Abu Bakr says, what are you doing? You were instructed to give it to the people of Yemen. He went back and gave it to the people of Yemen. A few years later, he came back again with money from Yemen he collected. And years had passed, Abu Bakr had passed away, and Umar was the Khalifa at the time. Came back with money. And Umar again instructed him, go back, it has to be given to those people. It's their haqq. Right? The next year he came back again. And Umar was like, what's going on? He goes, I distributed to everyone, there's no one left to distribute towards. Right? And this, I believe, was in a span of 10, maybe 10 years from the time where he was first instructed by the Prophet ﷺ to now during the Khalifate of Umar radiallahu anhu. So in that 10 years, zakat had transformed Yemen, right, into a prosperous society. People was upholding that pillar of zakat, right? Now, what happened to the people of Yemen as a result of this? They were strong financially, strong community. They were then going out on their boats to different parts of the world, spreading Islam. They were the ones who reached Indonesia, Malaysia, parts of Southeast Asia, right? Islam was flourishing. They were the ones who spread Islam to these parts of the world. It's because the zakat was upheld properly. A Sahaba, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, one of the greats, right? Legendary Sahaba. This was his mission. He was a competent person. He upheld the pillar of zakat, did it properly, and the whole community changed. So they were a beacon of good for expanding Islam to where it is right now. It's an amazing story, right? Again, we never think about it, right? Like that community was responsible for that. Why? Because of this. They had the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their heart. They were ready to travel. They were strong with the infrastructure they had set up for themselves. They were academically strong, Islamically, spiritually. They had the means to do this. The warning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we may have heard of this many times. Sometimes when we speak about zakat in khutbahs, right, we're always told about those who don't pay zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that their gold and silver coins that they withheld will be branded and burnt and branded onto their skin, and they'll be carrying that on the day of judgment. A very scary thought. You know, whatever we're not paying in zakat intentionally, the punishment for that is grave. It's also mentioned that on that day, they'll be turned into a serpent, the Prophet mentions. They'll be chasing them on the day of judgment. We've gone through this. We mentioned what are the hidden benefits of zakat. So it creates a love for Islam. So when you're actually paying and calculating zakat, you start getting a more of a love for Allah and His religion, right? And the religion of Islam. It creates honesty, like we mentioned, right? We start thinking of not ripping off people. We start thinking of how we're dealing with our money, right? It's not just a transaction between people. It's documented in the heavens, right? So it forces us, it makes us honest. It creates better business. Like I mentioned, it creates better business, financial and inventory management. So example I'll give you is, I've got a tire shop, for example, right? I sell tires, right? And I've bought all this stock, and at the end of the lunar year, I've got all this stock that's sitting there that hasn't been sold, right? What's going to call? I'm going to start thinking, oh my God, I have to pay a lot of zakat on this, right? So then I'll think, okay, maybe it was overpriced. Maybe that's why no one bought it. So what it'll force me to do is have a look at prices. I'll Google it. This guy's selling a lot lower than me. This person's selling a lot lower than me. Maybe the price is not correct, right? Well, I need to discount it, but to get this stock out, I'll have an end of financial year sale. And this is what modern end of financial e-sales are, right? So they don't have to pay tax on it. But Islamically, we have this too, but as a way of controlling the market, creating better business management. There's something that we need to control. We need to be introspective and look at the business model itself, right? So it creates astute businessmen, right? Because why are we overpriced? No one's going to buy it. Well, if I keep doing this, I'm gonna get shut down anyway, right? So it's a self-correcting course for us, right? When we're thinking of zakat in that way. Another thing is it creates trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't want to give it. I need this money. As soon as I give it, I'll put my trust in Allah. Whether I feel or not, I need to put my trust in Allah now. Right? It actually creates that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And both the givers and the receivers' hearts are purified. So the one who's eligible for receiving zakat, we're going to go into the other side of the part soon as well. We've been talking a lot about the zakat payer. We'll talk a bit about the zakat receiver as well, but how the two together work in tandem to uplift the community, but also it's a means of purification. And the more you give away, the more it becomes a barakah for you. It affects the rain as well, right? We know in the Quran it mentions when Nuh alayhi salam, right, was trying to command his people to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would warn them that if you don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will hold the rain, right? So faith is linked to sustenance. And by extension, faith, salah, zakat is linked, right? This brings me to an interesting story. I'm not sure about the authenticity of it, but I did hear about it. It was some part of Africa where it was a drought, there was no rain. So the people would be asking the imam to do the prayer of rain, right? Months had passed, So the imam said, we're going to go out into the open. So all of the community will go there with him, and we're going to start making a public dua for rain. Now, as they were going there, and they got there and they made dua for rain, multiple times they made dua for rain and it wasn't happening, right? So the people asked the imam of the community, why isn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answering our dua? Has he not heard this before? Why isn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answering our dua? He asked them, did any of you ever even bring an umbrella? Right? You're praying for rain, you're going all the way out there, you're praying for rain, but you're not bringing an umbrella with you. Right? So you don't even believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to answer you. So one of the etiquettes of dua is to make dua as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to answer it. So you've taken that means you've done everything. And this shows, if I'm making that dua for rain, everyone takes umbrellas with them. It's like you've got certainty, right? So again, fascinating story. Another hadith mentions that there is no community that does not pay the zakat except that Allah punishes them with years of drought and famine. So again, it's always linked to famine and drought. Okay, we'll have a little bit of a break. You guys want a 2-minute break? Stand up, stretch, right? Before we get into the calculations part. This is the heavier part, right? Yeah. The counting part, yeah. So you can get up, turn to the person next to you, give them a bit of a back massage, shoulder massage. You can turn to your right, give them a massage, turn to the left, give them a massage. Sorry? Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the full story. As I was reading that story came up in my mind, but I don't know the full. I can't remember the full story. I thought I'd mention it because it's a very powerful story. Subhanallah. So normally we would have like a tea or coffee break right now, right? Yeah, if you need a little bit of sugar hit, right? If we need a bathroom break, we can have a bathroom break. So if the sisters need to go, well, it's 11:42. Maybe we'll just start at 11:45. Right, so just 3-minute break. If you need to go to the bathroom, want to do a freshen up and make wudu again. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Welcome back. Session 2. Calculation of zakat. Just before I quickly begin this, I want to share a bit of a story. Again, that brother that was a friend of mine that became Muslim, mashallah, he's become a psychologist now. He's moved to the country, Parks. Anyone know where Parks is? Just where Orange, got Orange, yeah, just past Orange, another hour drive from Orange. So he's moved there, and he's mashallah, he's married, kids, he's practicing, but he's very humble brother in the sense that he reminds me of the Sahaba, literally, of Abu Dhar. We all know the story of Abu Dhar. He was famous because during the time of Umar radiallahu anh, when the wealth was pouring in, as Islam was spreading and conquering different parts of the world, and all this wealth was now coming to the Muslims, and Abu Dhar had experienced extreme poverty with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He saw the Prophet ﷺ lying on the straw mat. He lived this situation where they would boil the seed of a date and drink because they had nothing left. And now all of a sudden there's so much wealth in the community. And he was very austere in the sense that he had this zuhud, where detachment from the dunya, detachment from wealth. So he lived far away, went away from Medina. He wanted to go somewhere rural, away from the city, and live a humble life, a very mediocre, humble life, right? And the Sahaba would always try to bring him back in because they knew of his value as a senior Sahaba, but he shunned the world, right? And my friend reminds me of this because he loved his story, and he literally shunned everything and left. And he wants to go overseas to Mauritania and just study in the desert. That's his ambition. But I was having a conversation with him, and again, he's a psychologist, he really reflects on the wisdoms of Islam. And he was just mentioning, as we were coming back from uni one day, he was saying, did you hear about that story of that elderly lady that was found dead in her home, right? And 3 or 4 weeks had passed. And the neighbors only reported it once they could, the smell and then this was all over the media. This was maybe 15, 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. So he mentioned, subhanAllah, he goes, like, in Islam, this would never happen. I go, what do you mean? He goes, for the brothers at least, we're always told that we should be praying Fajr and Isha in the masjid. We should make it a habit, right? Try our best to pray Fajr and Isha in the masjid. In fact, in the Muslim world, the scholars would say it's fard, right? The masjid's down the road from you. The masjids are everywhere. It's fard for the brothers to pray Fajr and Isha at the masjid, right? In the West, this has been lifted, right? Because it's not how close is the masjid to everyone. Will this change though? If we have a masjid on your corner, would we then change it? Allahu alam, right? But the principle of I should still go to the masjid, I should make a part and parcel of life stays, right? In terms of a fatwa level, Allahu alam, right? But he goes, when you're constantly going to Fajr and you're constantly going to Isha, right? What would happen is, and for those who do go, and you notice the same group of brothers every time there, the moment you see one of the brothers is not there, you're like, what happened to Ahmed? Ahmed's on it today. Yeah. You don't say much. Second day, Ahmed's on it again. Has anyone heard about Ahmed? You ask each other about Ahmed or Sumaya, like, where are they? Right? Third day goes past. Maybe we should check on Ahmed, right? What does it do? It's forcing us to check in on each other. Can you see the beauty of Islam? Protecting itself, protecting the community, right? We might find out his mum's ill, and that's why he's been staying back looking after her. We go in and check on people, right? Again, amazing wisdom, right? Thought I'd just share that because it links to the previous part of how we as a community, should be looking after each other. Okay, the interesting part. Conditions for zakat on wealth, right? First of all, you can see those percentages there. We're going to go through that. So it's to give a certain amount of wealth, and the wealth percentages are, you got 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, and 20. We'll go through that in detail. From a particular kind of zakatable wealth, right? So gold and silver, we all know. Gold and silver is zakatable, right? Trade goods. So if you have a business and you got stock that's sitting there for a year, I'm a car salesman, right? I've got all these cars and they're unsold. Animal stock. farm produce, and treasure. What's treasure mean? Anyone want to have a go? What do I mean by treasure? No wrong answers. Well, there is a wrong answer, but take a stab at it. Because treasure. So treasure refers to minerals, resources that you're sitting on. So oil, right? We just use oil. So oil, core, iron core, copper, natural resources in the ground, right? And this is very interesting, right? Because the zakat due on oil is 20%. Yeah, so if you've got a house and you find oil under it, I extract it and I utilize and sell it. 20% of it has to be paid in zakat. Right? It's almost like it's a gift for you, like you didn't do anything to earn it, right? So 20% is very reasonable, right? If you look at it from that perspective. So 20% on oil. So these Saudis, these Emiratis, all of these rich oil, Gulf countries, are they paying zakat on their oil? Do you think they're paying zakat on their oil? Allahu alam, right? I don't want to say anything. Let's give them a call, right? But some analysts will say that if zakat was paid on oil, it would remove the poverty in the Muslim world, right? And you see the amount of oil that's being pumped out of these countries, right? If zakat was due, it was paid on it, we probably wouldn't have the situation of poverty. And then utilizing that funds to the betterment of the Muslim community. Imagine how much of an impact it can have. Yeah. Yeah. So gold and silver is more, it's not in the sense that if I found gold in my house, it's more like the gold and jewelry I've bought for consumption, like for wearing. So if I'm wearing a gold watch, gold bracelet, I've got a gold necklace, so jewelry generally, or I've saved money, bought a gold bar because I'm worried about the cash prices. So I want to have a store of gold. So it's more that type of so the two things I'm not going to go in depth with is number 3 and 4. Unless anyone's got cows. Anyone's got cows, camels, sheep, livestock, right? Or anyone's got a farm? You got a farm? Oh, okay. Overseas. All right. So I won't go through that in detail. Like I'll probably skip through it. But there is some resources we have online that you can get to do that. Or we can have a chat afterwards about that as well, on how you calculate zakat on those two. Generally, we end up skipping that for these masterclasses because generally most people living this part of Sydney won't have a farm or won't have a farm with produce or animals. To specific recipients, we've covered these 8 categories. And the other thing is the nisab. Have you guys heard of nisab? What does nisab mean? The 4th point there, when the mal reaches the threshold nisab, right? So nisab is a value. So in classical Islam, 85 grams gold or 595 grams of silver. So back then the prices were the same. So they were used either this or that, and that was the weight at the time. So when we're talking about 85 grams of gold, if you've got 86 grams of gold, right, sitting in your safe for 1 calendar year, right, that means you now pay zakat. You're a zakat payer, right? If you haven't reached that threshold, if it's below that threshold, right, then you don't pay zakat, right? So that's the other thing. When the mal reaches a certain threshold, so unlike income tax where you're taxed on income, here you're taxed on wealth that you're hoarding, right? So you've got this as a safety net, but if it gets too high, then you go above the threshold, then you pay zakat. You have to pay zakat on that, right? And the other one is the hold, right? For a full cycle of lunar years. This is very important as well. So the two things we need to know, most importantly, is the nisab and the hold in terms of the timelines and the calculation. So once you're above the nisab, we pay zakat. Once it's in our possession for a full lunar year, we pay zakat on that, right? And I'll go through some of the examples. I think I know your question you're going to have. Yeah. And then the other one is the different types of zakatable wealth. So how we calculate that. This slide is not up to date. It's a few days old. It's gone over 20,000, I believe now. So what does this mean? We have two nisab values, right? So the gold for nisab, so the nisab for gold at the moment for 85 grams is equivalent to $19,154.75. You can check the price on the NZF website. We have a daily update, so the daily gold price. So if you're paying zakat on the 10th of Ramadan, you check the price, and that's what you base your calculation off. And then the silver nisab is $2,338.35. Again, that's slightly gone up, but the gold's gone up over 20,000 right now. Why is there such a difference? Prices have been fluctuating so much. This has led to an interesting problem for scholars in the modern day, right? Back in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was pretty much identical. So you could just choose silver or gold, right? Now it's become very difficult because what do we use? Do we use the gold or the silver to determine whether we need to pay zakat, right? So let's say I've got $5,000. Just before I go into this example, I'll just show you the next slide because this is the other important thing that relates to what I'm going to go through. Zakat anniversary, right? So let's say your zakat, and does anyone have a zakat anniversary set for themselves? Or it's very like, oh, I'll do it in Ramadan. I assume a lot of us just do it in Ramadan, but we don't actually think of last 10 nights. Sure. Right? So we should be clear. Write down a date. This is my zakat anniversary. And every year, use that as your date. Right? So a practical method of ensuring zakat is calculated and paid on a timely and conservative manner. Right? So you specify a certain date when you do your calculation. A popular time for zakat anniversary is always going to be Ramadan for people. Right? Now, if you're the red line, right, and you started off with an amount above the nisab, and it never dropped below that blue line, and then your next anniversary date hits, you are now a zakat payer. If you're the yellow line, or the green line, there's a couple of months to the year where you drop below the nisab, right? Then you don't pay the zakat, right? So zakat is not due upon you. Now, there are some exceptions to this, right? And if you're in this situation, I'd probably err on the side of caution, right? So let's say I own a grocery store or I own a car yard, right? So this is more applicable to business owners where the stock that you sell doesn't usually stay for a year, right? It's not like I had this stock sitting there for a year. I sell groceries every day. I've got new, trucks coming in daily with bread and milk and groceries, and the turnover of stock is so high, right? So there's going to be, like, I'm never going to have a can of tuna on the shelf that will be there for a year, would I? And it's impractical for me to actually look at every single item to see, did that stay there for a year or not, right? So Islam is not meant to make it hard on us, right? So the scholars will mention what you do is when you do your stock take, right? You may have dropped below, but if you're always generally over, right? And you're only going up and down because of accounts receivable, accounts payable, there's always sometimes a delay, right? So you might drop below the nisab, but it's not due to the fact that you're in need, it's due to the fact that your supplier or the one you've invoiced hasn't paid their amount yet, right? So you've got an account with someone, they owe you money, you know you're going to get the money, they have a 30-day payment terms, like a lot of companies, right? They might say, look, you provide us XYZ, and we have a 30-day payment term, or we do all our invoicing on the end of the week. So for Tuesday, you bought the stock, money's coming in, but they haven't paid you till Friday. So you might drop below that, but that doesn't really necessitate that you're now exempt from paying zakat, right? So we all know our situation. Again, the idea is we don't want to be a zakat dodger, right? We don't want to be trying to intentionally dodge zakat. We know that person pays. It's just their timeline is we do invoicing every Friday, right? So for those who are involved in business, you will have situations like this, right? So, but lay people generally might end up following that rule. But when you've got a more complicated scenario, you can always just check with us what is the best thing to do, right? On our website too, you can always get asked these questions. And we have a couple of brothers and with a sheikh on board that can answer these questions quite quickly. So if you're unsure, best to ask and get clarification. So as I was going back to the zakat amount, right? See, we've got the zakat, we've got the nisab amount, right? But there's two different values of nisab. There's the gold and the silver, right? And you can see the difference we've had from last year to this year. It's growing rapidly, right? So let's say the nisab for gold is what we use to determine whether you're paying zakat or not, right? So let's say Sydney decides that we're going to adopt gold as our nisab value, and Melbourne will adopt silver, right? Which city is going to have more zakat payers now? Right? Ask the question again, right? Yeah, that's fine. Sydney, we adopt gold. Melbourne adopts silver. Which city will have more zakat payers? The silver one, right? Melbourne will have more people paying zakat, right? Now, let's say, like similarly, Sydney, we adopted the gold, but when we're paying zakat to a recipient, to assess eligibility, we also use the gold nisab, right? Melbourne uses the silver nisab. Which city will have more people qualified to receive zakat? Right. So what again, just to help explain what I mean by that, is when we're looking at eligibility of zakat, one of the criteria is that the person has less than the nisab value. So if I'm in Sydney, I've got $50,000 in my account, and I apply for zakat, and I've met all the requirements to be eligible. Everything checks in, right? And I've got less than the gold, right? Because Sydney adopted gold as an nisab, I will be eligible to receive zakat, right? In Melbourne, if I had 15,000, I would be ineligible, right? Because Melbourne's adopted the silver one, right? So in Melbourne, there'll be less people who are eligible and less people who would be paying, but way more people who pay zakat, right? So which one should we adopt? Which one's a better situation, right? Again, no, I mean just from your thoughts, right? Which one is better position to adopt, right? Should we be trying to get more people to pay zakat, right? Or should we be making more people eligible for zakat, right? Because if the nisab is 20,000, which it is right now, there's not many people that are going to pay zakat, right? And when people apply, not many people would be eligible, right? Because you've got 19,000, that's you're not eligible, right? Whereas if I use the silver one, there'll be lots of people paying zakat. Everyone qualifies. Most people have 2,300 in their account, right? So most people will be eligible to pay zakat. So we have more money in the community to benefit more people. So we should take silver if we want more people to benefit, right? But by adopting that, we can't benefit people either because everyone's going to have a certain amount, but they're actually in need, right? It's a very interesting predicament. To choose which one they use. So that's left to us, correct, right? But the recommendation, and this is the wisdom of the scholars when they look at these situations, right? So as they've seen it diverge now, the adopted position of NZF, right, worldwide, right, not just Australia, is that when we assess eligibility for someone to be a zakat payer, we use silver. We recommend you use silver, right? Why? Because there's more people that will benefit by you paying zakat, right? However, when we assess recipients, we actually use gold. So what this means, right, is we get more people giving their zakat, more zakat pays in the community, and we have more people who are eligible for zakat in the community. So this is the wisdom, right, of how the scholars balance modern problems like this. and you see the benefit, right? If a person is eligible to pay zakat, they want to pay zakat, they'll pay the zakat. And if they are even if they're at 2,500, what's 2.5% of that? Not much, right? What, just a couple of $100, not even. Very, very small amount, right? So there's not much that you're paying, but you're getting the advantage of now engaging in an act of worship, right? And on the flip side, if someone is applying for zakat and they're in genuine need, they would have been disqualified because the nisab was too low and they don't meet the criteria. So we keep the criteria high so we can give out more zakat to help more people, right? So that's how it works. Any questions on that from the sister side? Nope, don't think so. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? The wisdom and why we use this approach. Be honest, right? Do you currently have a fixed zakat anniversary date in your calendar? If not, you should set one now. So if you want, you choose the 27th night, right? But is the 27th night Laylatul Qadr? Yeah. Over the yeah. No, it would be the last one. Because you can prepay zakat, right? So it's due by your anniversary. So if my anniversary for my zakat is on the 25th of Ramadan, right? I can pay on the 20th of Ramadan in full. No problem. I've prepaid it 5 days in advance. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, this is in the break, this is when I've heard this, I mentioned, the scholars say that you can pay up to 2 years in advance. So if we're owing zakat in the past, that's missed zakat that needs to be paid ASAP when possible. But let's say I know that I think use this example that I need to pay $1,200 for my on my me and my family in terms of zakat money, right? So this will be due on the 25th of Ramadan for me. Right? So on the 25th of Ramadan, I pay my $1,200. Now I anticipate the next year it will also be $1,200. So what I can do is rather than paying it in 12 months' time, I can pay right now, right? Or I can schedule 100 a month for the next 12 months, which is what a lot of people do now, just to help with cash flow, right? So I can pay $100 a month in advance, leading up as long as that full 1,200 is paid by my zakat anniversary. Make sense? Now, what happens that on that day, yeah, I checked my zakat calculation and I actually owed $1,500. What would I do then? Just pay the 300 difference, right? Which is common sense. What if I overpaid and I actually only owed $1,000? Consider it sadaqah, right? So, this is the beauty of having flexibility in it, but as long as it's paid by that date, right? So let's go through rates on zakatable wealth, right? So crude oil, natural resources, 20%. Again, it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You just stumbled upon it, and now you're going to make a lot of money on it, right? It's there for the benefit of the community. 10% off. So this is where these other percentages come in. So if you've got agriculture, if you've got crops, right, and they're watered purely by the rain, so you don't irrigate them at all, right? Then you pay 10% on that, right? If you irrigate it partly yourself and then rely on rain as well, so 50-50 or there's a mixture, then it's 7.5%. And then 5% if you're investing money to water it yourself. So there's no rain coming in this particular farm of yours and you're doing 100% of the irrigation, right? Then you pay 5%. See the beauty and the wisdom and the fairness in this, right? Right. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just giving the rain and you're not doing anything, 10%. Yeah, you can't do 2.5, right? Right. And then obviously 2.5% of is the default that we usually use for anything else, right? So this is the accumulation of assets and gold and merchandise that we have. So for most Muslims living in Australia, we're going to just use 2.5%, but we do have Muslim farmers, right? They'll have these questions. I had a question last week. A brother came up to me and said, again, he had an interesting question about an Aussie bloke that wanted to use his farmland. So he sold me some cows. Now I own these cows. How do I calculate zakat on it? I've got 10 cows, but the land's mine, but he's got 10 cows that are using my land at a discounted rate. So again, there's always complex scenarios and questions. But what's amazing is in the world of fiqh and our classical scholarship, right? There isn't many scenarios that haven't been answered, right? Even modern day things like superannuation. We use thought experiments that were done by the scholars 13, 1200 years ago, right? So with superannuation, what does everyone know about superannuation in terms of is it zakatable or not?
Yeah.
We don't have accessibility to it, but it's your money. So yeah, do we pay zakat on it or not, right? So the official opinion of NZF is that we don't pay zakat on it, right? Right? Yeah. But why? Why? What's the Sharia evidence from the Sharia on about? No, but if you reach the age, there is a certain sense of it will come to you, right? It will come to you. So there's two types of things happening. Let's say I've given someone a loan. Actually, I'll get to the loan part later because it's going to get more technical, right? But superannuation loans, all this stuff, how do they get? So let's say I've given $100,000 to someone. Now I need to pay my zakat. Do I pay zakat on the 100,000, or does the person who borrowed it pay zakat on the 100,000? Questions like this, right? We'll go through very soon. So for a basic, here's your formula. Simple as that. The zakat due is 2.5% of your zakatable assets minus your deductible liabilities, right? So whatever that is, you can take a photo of that. And we're going to go in, we've already gone through what zakatable assets are, but we're going to go through the liabilities part. And then what is the framework that we use from a Sharia perspective on determining what is a liability, right? And also a bit more about what is a zakatable asset. So let's use this as an example, right? So that red line is the whole, right? Sorry, not the whole, is the nisab value, right? And one lunar year passes, and you can see that we never dropped below that amount, right? So I had 650 to start with. I have 700 that I end off with. So what do I pay zakat on? The 700, the 650, the 900. What do I pay zakat on? You'd go 700. Anyone object to that? Would anyone do something differently? The answer is yeah, correct, 700, right? So you look at what you started with, what you ended with on that date, whatever you have is what you pay zakat on. So some people try to let's reduce it, let's buy something. I guess you take yeah. I mean, if you were going to buy something, you were going to buy a car or something, and it drops, that's different. But if you're intentionally buying it just so you don't pay zakat on it, then yeah, you can do that with the ATO, but you can't do it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, zakat on jewelry, right? So, I already skipped to the slide. I was going to ask the question first. Do we pay zakat on jewelry that we wear? Okay, but you can see the answer in front, right? So, the general principle amongst the scholars, the majority of the scholars, is that no, on the jewelry that you wear day to day, you don't pay zakat on it, right? So for women, right? So let's say sister's wearing a bracelet that she wears daily, right? It's a $800 gold bracelet or something. But in the safe at home, you might have, I don't know, $12,000 worth of gold sitting there, right? So, and that's not being utilized. Whole year passes and it was never worn, right? Then that with your other assets, if it goes above the nisab, zakat is due on that amount. So let's use the amount that's over the nisab. Let's say I got $30,000 of gold, right? That I don't wear, but I've got $5,000 worth of gold that I wear throughout the year. A wedding, some function, I wear these $5,000 more regularly. But the other 30,000 I've stored away. It was given to me as a gift from my mom. It was given to me as a gift at my wedding. It's sitting there. It's just a saving for me for a rainy day. I've got $30,000 of jewelry that I don't wear. Do I pay zakat on 30,000 or 35,000? Maybe the sisters should answer. Right? Would you pay zakat on the 30,000 or the 35,000? According to this, depends on what school of thought you are, right? So, Imam Abu Hanifa and the school of thought, the Hanifi school of thought says it doesn't matter whether you wear it or not. You pay zakat on it, right? So if there's any Hanifis here, right, then we adopt that opinion, right? But the other three schools, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, right, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, mention that there won't be any zakat due on that gold that is being worn day to day, only on the amount that's not being used, right? So that's how you work that out. And there you can see the hadith. There was a narration that Aisha radiallahu anha mentions of the Prophet that the Messenger of Allah entered upon me and I was wearing rings of silver on my hand. He said, "What is this, O Aisha?" I said, "I made them to adorn myself for you, O Messenger of Allah." He said, "Have you given zakat on them?" I said, "No." He said, "The punishment for them is hell. For them in hell is enough for you." So just a reminder that zakat is due on, right? And if you look at that 20, 12, 24, 22, 18, 14 karat gold. We always get questions about how to calculate it. So many of the sisters will weigh their gold to calculate it. So the formula you would normally use is if you got something that's 24 karat, right? Then it's pretty much pure gold. So the full value of that is what you use to calculate your the amount you own it. And then depending on what carat it is, so if it's an 18 karat or a 22 karat, then you times it by that fraction, right? Yeah, so like let's say you only wore it once for a wedding throughout the year. That's it. Then that's you don't pay zakat on that because you're using it, even as long as you're using that lunar year. Yeah. But if it's sitting there and you're just accumulating gold and gold and gold, again, the idea is we don't want to incentivize people just hoarding wealth, right? Rather utilizing it. And it's an interesting example one of the scholars mentioned is, let's say I have $1 million sitting in my bank account. I'm not using it. Every year I have to pay 2.5% on it. If I decide to buy a business with it, or a rental property, I buy a house, right? And now I use it as an investment to rent it out. Do I still pay zakat on that $1 million? I don't. Is that zakat dodging? No, I've taken a bit of a risk, right? I'm investing money. Someone's benefiting who can rent from it. The money is being utilized. And the idea is money, we don't want it to stay stagnant, right? Zakat is aimed to keep the water flowing, keep the economy moving, right? If you look back at COVID-19, when the economy was crashing, the worry, the grief, the stress people had, what did the government do? They introduced a stimulus, COVID-19 stimulus. The whole purpose behind the design of that was to help keep the economy moving. Because once you got $750 in your bank account, oh, I can buy something. You go buy something, that business is now, it's starting, and the system starts moving again, right? And then they have to buy something they have to pay their wages. It keeps the economy moving. So the purpose of zakat is to keep the economy moving, right? And stop the accumulation of wealth, because that will lead to injustice, right? Okay, so this is another importance of intention, right? So this determines whether something is zakatable or non-zakatable, right? So let's say I bought a house, right? And I'm sitting on this house with the intention, oh no, let's use cars, right? I've got 25 cars, right? And I drive one every day, right? Would I pay zakat on that? No, right? Because I've got no intention to resell them, right? But if I've got a clear intention to resell these cars, I'm a car dealer, I buy and sell cars, then it's a zakatable form of wealth, right? If I have a clear intention for personal use, it's non-zakatable. If I don't have any clear intention, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, I haven't made up my mind, it's non-zakatable. If I have a conditional intention. So if I get a job, then I'll sell it. If this happens, then I'll sell it. If my block I bought gets the application approved to build, then I'll sell it. Right? It's a conditional intention on something. It's still non-zakatable because there's still ambiguity. You're waiting for the thing to happen. So you don't. It's not like you're getting penalized for holding on to that now. And finally, you've got a clear intention to resell in future, but least in the interim. Then it's zakatable. Yeah. Any questions on this slide? Pretty. It's a very robust framework, and that goes to the zakat on property, right? So the general principle that there is no zakat on property, right? It's due on anything that carries the intention of buying and selling to increase capital. So we've got a few scenarios here. So I sit down so I can see it better. So if I've got a property for personal use, I live in it. There's no zakat due upon that, right? Otherwise, we'd go broke very quick, right? What if I rented a property, right? The zakat will be due on the rental income, not on the value of the asset. Yeah. What if I bought a property to sell it? Then yeah, it's zakatable, right? What if I'm deciding to sell? I haven't decided. So there's no clear intention right now, is there? Again, it's not zakatable. What if I change my intention to sell? So I bought it not to sell, but then I've changed it to sell later on. So if the intention was made to sell on or after the purchase, it's non-zakatable. But if the intention to sell for profit is for profit, then it is zakatable. Right? And the final situation is changing the intention to not sell. Then obviously, you bought it to sell, but then you've changed your intention. Then you don't pay zakat on it. Right? And that happens many times. You might have bought something to the intention to sell, but then you've changed your mind. So you're not going to be copying this like a debt on you now, right? In terms of zakat. Zakat on business. So this is important for those who have business, right? Your zakatable assets for your business are your cash in the business, your cash receivables, your trade receivables, and any stock inventory you have, right? So your office, would the furniture be zakatable? If your office furniture, your monitor, that won't be zakatable because you're using it for the business, right? Right? It's not one of those four categories, right? It's not stock or inventory you're selling, right? What's an example of non-zakatable assets? So these are any service receivables, prepaid expenses, right? Fixtures and fittings. Like I said, the actual components of your office are not zakatable. The plant, the equipment, the property, and even IP, intangible fixed assets. So your copyright or trademark, it's not zakatable. It's not a physical product, is it? So your IP is not zakatable. Because that can change so rapidly, right? IP and the valuation of IP. I don't think we need to get into that because not many people will have a trademark or an IP. But if you do, and you've got an asset that's valued only due to the intellectual property behind it, then do you pay zakat on that or not? No, you don't pay zakat on it, right? That's the default rule. If you're unsure, if you feel like you're feeling guilty, like I've got a trademark, or I've got some asset, it's intellectual property, it's a software system or something, it's worth $2 million. I'm going to sell it. What's the situation there? Best to ask the scholar then, in that case, if it's specific. Deductibles. So these are things you can deduct from your zakatable assets. So when you're determining the zakat that you pay, we had that equation earlier. So the equation was your zakat due. So you got zakatable assets. So you've worked out all of the assets that are zakatable, and then we work out all the liabilities that we can deduct from that. Right. So if you've got a rental payment due in that month, that can be deducted from your zakatable asset amount. So you got $50,000 is your zakatable asset, but you got total deductions of 10,000. Then that means the zakat we calculate it on the 40,000. So yeah, any outstanding invoices, utility bills, outstanding tax, bank loans, personal or private loans. Now, we're going to go through loans as well. So bank loans. So what if you got a mortgage, 30-year mortgage? Do you deduct the whole mortgage amount? Because then you would have no zakat to pay, right? And one sister was like, "Yeah, I went through your calculator on the website, and it says I don't have to pay any zakat." But she felt like it doesn't seem right. And when we look at the way she was utilizing it, is she was putting the full balance of her loan, her bank loan, into the calculator. So we don't do that, right? It's not a long-term things. Long-term loans are not taken off from that. The next one is zakat on superannuation. So zakat on superannuation. So in Australia, right? So in the UK or other countries like the US, you got the 401k. There you have, it's obviously like Australia, it's a compulsory thing. Sometimes it's not compulsory. With Australia, it's compulsory, right? You can't say, "Oh, I don't want to pay super." The super gets paid by your employer, right? So, and you have no access to it. You have no choice in it. Therefore, the scholars will say that you don't pay zakat on that, right? So one of the examples of this, the analogies that are used is, uh, a man drops all his gold dinars and gold and silver coins in a well. Once he's dropped it in that well, it's very deep. He knows where it is. He's got knowledge of where it is. He knows how to access it. He needs to go down that well. But going down that well could risk his life, right? So he has no access to it. Does he pay zakat on that now? He doesn't pay zakat on it. He doesn't has no access to it. Now, what if years pass, another brother comes and excavates the site, and he finds this wealth at the bottom of the well? He's a righteous brother, alhamdulillah. He decides that, like, I need to find the rightful owner. So he goes around asking the people of the village who owns this gold and silver coins. No one owns up. So he's holding on to it. He's still trustworthy. He doesn't spend it. He's like, I'll hold on to it as long as I need to until I find the rightful person. Now he sits in a gathering with people and he mentions this story of how he did this project and he excavated the well. And the other brother that owned the money, he's like, "That's my money." He's like, "Can you tell me exactly how much it was?" And he gives the exact amount of coins and gold, exact amount of coins and silver, describes exactly how it is. They verify that it's his money and he returns his money to the brother. Now, does the brother owe zakat on his money? Okay, but he didn't pay for the last 10 years. So does that count as missed zakat? No? Huh? He knew the money was there. He always knew the money was there. He just couldn't access it. So superannuation, we know the money's there. We can't access it, right? So the scholars will say that the time he receives his money, at the time he receives it, right, he waits 1 lunar year and then pays zakat on it in one go, right, for the money he lost in the well. However, with the superannuation, they differ. They say that you pay the superannuation the moment you receive it. You don't wait a year. Why? Why do you think that's the case? I'd like to get you to think, right? Why do you think that's the case? Why is this different to the world situation? Yes, exactly. You knew you were going to get the superannuation on retirement. You're getting that money. Whereas the will, you had no idea you're going to get it or not. So it's not like you were planning to spend the money. If you all of a sudden, it's like inheritance. If you suddenly get inheritance and you didn't know about it, sometimes the inheritance is written in your name and you didn't know about it. You could have been a part of someone's 1/3 and you got, $500,000. Now, the moment you receive that, it would be unfair to pay zakat straight away on it because you need a few months to think about how you're even going to invest and spend the money. I see that the beauty of the deen is amazing. So you're given 1 lunar year to pay zakat in the situation where the money came to you and you didn't expect it. So you assumed it was lost in the well. You're never going to recover it. Out of sight, out of mind. Even though it's there, you have no thought of ever getting it in your lifetime. So the zakat will be due when you receive it after 12 months, whereas the superannuation is due when you get it. No, they wouldn't have to. from my knowledge, because again, death comes unexpected as well. So that falls into the category of inheritance now. So inheritance, there's a 1 year wait period. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Mm. Yes, you pay as soon as you get it because you know you're getting it. So let's say you got $250,000 in super that you get on retirement, right? But it's kind of drip fed to you, right? Is that what you're saying? So you're getting it. Can you access all in one go though? Okay. Mm. Yeah. 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 Mm. I would need to double check that, but I would assume, based on the principle we mentioned earlier, that because you know it's coming, the moment you get it, you should pay it. Right? Yeah. 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 But I think you can, yeah. Because normally what happens is people will withdraw the whole amount and invest it into a property and then live off their, a lot of people do that. If, yeah, because they might want to pass it on to their children. So look, I don't need it. I can buy a property with it. I can live off 800-900 a week from it in my retirement, but the asset still grows and yeah. So I need to double check, but I would assume that you normally do get it in access to it. You have full control over it. Yeah, that would be in reference to that. Yeah, because you have access to it. Yeah. Yes. Use it to cash out. Yeah, exactly. And then you've got 2.5. So there's how you've got the voluntary part of your super. So it's 12.5% now, or 12%. 12%, right? So 12% of your wages, on top of your wages, is put into your super fund, but you can opt to pay extra. So you can make it 15%. So that extra 3% is zakatable every year. The reason for that is because you chose to give it up, right? It wasn't like mandated on you. So the 12%, no, you have no access, you have no control in it. So you don't pay on it, right? But the extra that you're paying, the voluntary contributions, it is zakatable. If you never get the optional part. Oh yeah, so that's why we don't pay it until retirement. So on retirement, when you get it, you pay it because you can't pay if you don't have access to it. The optional part, true, but you have the choice. You're making the choice to give up your wealth. You had control of that portion you gave up. So it's a risk you're taking, but you have to pay the zakat on that then. Um, what's the next one? Release, access. And this is again when we took out, if anyone took out any super during the COVID um window, yeah, a lot of people did that. Yeah, we did it. So yeah, 10 grand. Yeah, yeah. So people took out their super. So because now you have access to it, then you have to pay zakat on that. So it changed. So if for that you didn't, I mean, didn't calculate it, then you need to look back and say, did I have any zakat that I missed? So did that 10,000 be used? Did I calculate zakat on that 10,000 portion I withdrew? If not, you got to go back and pay the $250 on that. Right. Yeah, and so you can see the two criteria: 2.5% upon first access, 2.5% up after passing of 1 lunar year. The lunar year one is when it wasn't expected, right? Like inheritance. Anyone got shares in business, stocks, investments? This can get complicated, but it generally, and the complicated part is because When you have shares in a business, you have ownership in the business. And just like your own business, you pay zakat on your income from the business, right? That goes above the nisab. So just like you'd calculate your zakat that's due on your business, would this mean that you need to calculate zakat based on the business you have shares with? So you need to go through their bank statements, or you need to go through their annual reports, right? For most people, it can get quite cumbersome and technical to do that, right? But generally, that would be the principle. You need to know, and that's the formula they normally use. So the cash equivalent, or accounts receivable inventory divided by the total number of shares issued by that company, right? Is what you use to find out what your factor is, and then you multiply it by the actual market value of your shares. Some countries use 25% as a baseline just to keep it standard. So for example, let's say I own $100,000 in a company, shares in a company, right? So what they would say is, because like this is the opinion I know that the UK adopts, you don't pay zakat on the 100,000. They've standardized the factor at 25%. So you only pay zakat on the 25% of that amount. So the 100,000 goes down to 25,000. That 25,000 is what you calculate 2.5% on, right? That's easy for the UK. I don't believe that the Australian NZF adopts that. They've left it open for you to calculate that factor. But you can always consult one of our account, zakat specialists. Brother Munir, I'm not sure if you've ever met Mother Munir. He's the brains who understands the ins and outs of stock markets, all the financial side. So he's the one who always answers our questions on the website. So if you've got any questions specifically for shares you're not sure on, you can always ask online. But that's the general principle. Yeah. It's very volatile, the stock price, market prices of this. And then you got short-term trading or day trading, right? So people who do day trading, and it became so popular a while back, right? You see all the YouTubers that are day trading with crypto. It still is, right? And they're a lot of Muslim gurus too, right? Showing how they've made millions through the stock market, right? Yeah. So if anyone's got a crypto wallet, you can easily sell your crypto for cash, right? Or you can buy more crypto. So you do a bank transfer into your crypto wallet to buy a crypto asset, right? So it's treated like cash. And we actually accept zakat now through Bitcoin as well. So you can pay your zakat via Bitcoin as opposed to cash, right? Yeah. We need to be ready, right, for the times, right? So NZF does have you have the ability to pay your zakat to us through Bitcoin as well. Because it is becoming reliable now and a fairly stable store of value. And for buying and selling, it is utilized more and more. And who knows where it will be utilized in 10 years' time, right? How common it is. So long-term assets, so long-term investments, because the company doesn't pay zakat, right? So if a company pays zakat, then it's non-zakatable, right? But we normally use that formula because just because the company is a non-Muslim company, of course they're not going to pay zakat, right? So you can't find out if they're paying zakat or not. Generally, it's a non-Muslim company, they're not paying zakat. But your share of it, well, you need to pay zakat on that, right? And then when you're cashing out, so when you cash out your profit from stocks, similar to the super situation, right? Once you cash it out, minus any taxes and fees, you pay zakat on that amount. Because you're using it like any other business commodity where you're buying and selling. If you're a day trader, you're trying to make a bit of profit here and there by selling when it's at a high, buying it when it's low. So it's the clear intention of it is reselling. Loans is important because this is more common than stocks for people. I've given my brother $500. I've given someone else $20,000. I've given someone $5,000. Right? How does it factor into our calculations for deductibles? So there's two categories of deductibles that got deductible receivables. You've got weak debt and you've got strong debts. So a strong debt is when you're very sure that you're going to get the money, right? And the ruling for that strong debt is that you add that to your amount, so you pay zakat on that. So let's say I've given my brother $100,000, a large amount. And I know he's going to pay it back because he's just waiting for a settlement for a property to sell. He's quite wealthy. He knows what he's doing. I know he'll pay me back. He's got a short-term loan. My Zakat anniversary is approached. I know he's going to pay me back. He might pay me after the anniversary. I still use that 100,000 as my money. Even though he has it, I will get it back. I'm very convinced I'm going to get it. So I use that in my calculation, right? Interesting economics here. On his side, he owes 100,000, so he deducts it from his zakatable asset. So there's not two people paying zakat on the same amount. The money sitting here, he's paying zakat, right? Not the guy who borrowed it. Now, because the guy who borrowed it can use it as a deduction because it's someone else is paying zakat on it. A weak debt receivable, if it's a debt where there's an element of uncertainty whether you get the money or not. The brother was in need. I gave him money. I gave him 20 grand. And I know he's struggling. I have a feeling he's not going to be able to pay me back. And 1 year passes, he hasn't paid me. Another year passes. I don't think he'll ever end up paying me back. So I write it off. It's a weak debt, right? So the weak debts are non-zakatable until funds are received. So this is another question, interesting scenario the scholars discuss again, like the example of the well, right? Let's say I lend someone $100,000. I'm just using a big number for example. And I was sure that he was going to pay, but he went bankrupt. And then I'm like, oh, it's turned into a weak debt now, right? It's gone bankrupt. I don't think I'll get my money back. I've written it off as a write-off. So I've deducted this from my zakatable assets now. And the brother just fled the country. And then like 9-10 years later, the brother gives me a call and says, I've got your money, I want to pay you back. And he pays me back in full. Okay. Do I pay for the 10 years that I didn't pay zakat on this asset now? Because it was a debt I gave to someone, I was deducting it for 10 years. Or do I just pay now upon receiving it? Or do I pay after one lunar year after receiving it? Pay once you receive it, but you had no idea you were going to get it. You had written it off. Right? It's like the well example now. You didn't know I was going to get it. Huh? It's changed category now, right? And because I didn't know I had it, I didn't have no access to it. I don't pay for the last 10 years. But the moment I get it, it's not like super, because super, you know, you get it, you pay it in one go. It's going to be like the other example where it's like inheritance now. It just came, then I got a year. I can do something with it, then I pay it after a year. Right? Yep. Yep. Mm. Yep. So the question, just for the sisters, the question was during COVID, people had saved up and paid for Hajj, right? And Hajj was cancelled. And for a few years, they were hoping that, okay, maybe I can go the next year, maybe I can go the next year, expecting that the money that was sitting there is still there. But it never eventuated and they lost their money. Oh, they got their money back. Okay. Within 4 or 5 years. So they got their money back. So were they certain they were going to get the money, or were they getting doubtful that the money was going to be returned to them or not? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a bit of hope, but if you're classifying this as a weak, and this is where one person might classify it as weak, one might classify it as strong. So depending on what you classify, because everyone's got a different thought process in terms of, are they going to eat my money and leave, right? Oh no, I trust these guys. The money's sitting there, I'll get it back. They're just trying to see if they can book a flight for me, and because the prices went up and they couldn't do it again, they've returned my money. So if that's the case and you've got a strong inclination that you'll receive it back, it's a strong debt. So you'd follow the ruling from that path where it is zakatable, right? Whereas if it's a weak one, it's almost like, oh, you got a gift back, and now you've got time, It's still zakatable, but only once you receive it after 12 months. Yeah, not for the previous year. Yeah. So, for example, we gave the example of the super. Once you receive it, you pay the super on it. But let's say it was inheritance you didn't expect, and you got $500,000 come into your account. The moment you get it, that's when that clock ticks for the 1 lunar year. You need to wait 1 lunar year for that amount to be in your possession for it to be zakatable, because you didn't expect it. So you got this $500,000 from inheritance from someone who put your name in it. It's coming to your account. The moment I get it, I don't have to pay zakat on it. I need time to think about what I'm going to do with it. So you wait 1 lunar year. Yeah, you pay some expenses, you clear some debts, you might go to Hajj, you might do a lot of things, you utilize the money. It's being utilized in the economy, spreading things out, clearing debts or paying for things, whatever it may be. You're like, I always wanted to buy my parents something, a nice car, they didn't have a great car, whatever it may be. You need time to use it. I need to buy a house, buy an investment. So you need time to kind of work with the money. But if you just sat with the money for a year, did nothing with it, then the whole point is we're discouraging hoarding that wealth. So if you sat with that 500,000 for a year, did nothing with it, yes, you pay zakat on it. But if you use 400,000 and you only kept 100 in there, then you pay zakat on the 100. So generally, okay, what is a long-term and short-term debt? So debts that are payable in full within 12 months, they're usually deductible, right? So incurred expenses prior to the zakat anniversary to be settled in full within those 12 months. That's something you can deduct, right? But long-term liabilities like your home loan, you can't deduct all your payments in the future, right? Only the ones that are current month, right? And arrears, right? So if you've got overdue payments, so you haven't paid the rent for the last 2 months, you're behind, that can be deducted. Again, the idea is to make it easier for you, right? If you still have to pay zakat on that amount, or you can't deduct that amount, it makes life difficult for people. And zakat has never been designed to make life difficult for people. At the end of the day, it's only 2.5%. But there's a lot of rulings on how to make sure that we're not oppressing people who might have complicated situations where they're overdue on payments or they've got other things happening in their life. So debts due within the next 12 months should only be deducted if the ability to repay the debt is impacted by the zakat repayment itself. Very important, that one. Right, so the last point, debts that are due within the next 12 months should only be deducted if the ability to repay the debt is impacted by the zakat payment. Example, I gave the brother $100,000, right? I know I'm going to get it back, but my zakat anniversary has come and I can't pay it because I haven't got it back. So my ability to pay the zakat is impacted because I haven't got that debt paid back. Then I can deduct it. But then it'll fall into the next year because once you receive it, it gets part of the next year. Does that make sense? So sometimes you can't pay the zakat because you're waiting for money to come in. So you don't deduct that. You just delay it upon receiving it. Non-deductible. So future expenses and bills. So I can't deduct my rental payments for the year of 2027, right? Even next month, right? Rent or next month's utility bills, I can't deduct. Only the current month, right? Previous month if it's overdue. And anything that's not payable at all in the next 12 months. So a long-term debt which is not due to be repaid now or in the next 12 months cannot be deducted right now. Unlawful income, interesting one, right? So we mentioned earlier that zakat, and the purification of wealth, right? This is interesting because let's say I have $100,000 sitting in my account for 12 months, right? And I have a savings account which had 1% interest. So I've got an extra $1,000 in my account now. So I've got $101,000 in my bank account after 12 months. That $1,000 in there, that's interest. Do I pay zakat on that? No. It's haram already. So I have to deduct that from my calculation. I pay zakat on the 100,000, not on that surplus 1,000 that's interest money. You don't calculate zakat on interest, right? Like you're purifying wealth, but this is beyond, this is not pure in totality, right? It's not like a portion of it needs to be purified. The whole amount is impure. So there's no zakat due on that $1,000, right? So you might say, oh, that's good for me. But what if I had $100,000 and it grew to $120,000 in interest? So $20,000 I don't pay zakat on. That's fantastic, right? One may think that. Well, first of all, it's a scary thing to think of that you've got haram income in your bank account. That needs to be like given away in it's not sadaqah either, is it? Yeah, it's tainted wealth. You need to get rid of it, right? However, on the flip side, let's say I have a mortgage payment that I make, and in my mortgage payment, I pay, let's say, 4,000 a month, right? For my mortgage, I'm paying 4,000 a month, and I've took a riba loan for this bank, and that payment, it shows on the statement that $2,500 is the principal, and $1,500 is the interest, right? So when I do my zakat calculations and I'm doing my liabilities, and I'm looking at all the liabilities I have, and I'm deducting it, normally I would deduct 4,000, right, for that month, or if it was overdue. So let's say I had last year's month, I haven't rent I haven't paid, or mortgage I need to pay. I can take it off as a zakat, like a liability, deducted from my zakatable assets, right? When I take off that 4,000, right, it's fine if it was a normal standard Islamic finance loan. But if I've got an interest-based loan, that interest portion of the loan can't be deducted. Right, so that $1,500 of interest I'm paying for the month, I can't do a tax deduction on that. I can't do a deduction on that as a liability, right? And this is for many people. You think, oh, what does it force people to do? To start thinking about their finances again, right? Purifying their dealings with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it incentivizes us to switch to Islamic finance, right? Here's a sample scenario. The outcome shouldn't have been there. I need to fix the slides up. I would have got you guys to answer each one of them. So Bilal is a typical Aussie tradie. His trade is tiling and he sells some tiles on the side. Let's see how we can help Bilal. So personal car is a zakatable? No. Work vehicle is a zakatable? No, right? So he's got two vehicles, one for home, one for work. He's got $10,000 of savings in his bank account. Yes, it's zakatable. He's got 20 grams of gold. It's zakatable, right? So all of this is zakatable. Business cash is zakatable. Goods for sale. He's selling tiles, right? And even though they don't sit with him for a year, it's because it's a regular thing that's going to buy and sell. You just look at at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, how many tiles you have. On that amount you sell, and you calculate zakat. $5,000 on his zakat anniversary, it's zakatable. Trade tools, drills, different tools he uses, they're not zakatable. Bills and rent for that month, $5,000. It's deductible. And then trade receivables, he's got $13,000 his invoice for someone that he's expecting that month. That's zakatable. He hasn't got it, but it's still zakatable. It goes in that calculation. And then in conclusion, right, you look at those 10 slices of cucumber, right? We look at one of those cucumbers, we're taking it and we're just taking a quarter of it. That's what 2.5% is. So your 2.5% is sometimes their 100%, right? It's the right of the poor and needy on your wealth. The rest is all yours. The rest is all ours, right? I think that's the last slide. Oh, miss zakat, right? So let's go. Miss zakat. Last part, miss zakat. So what are some reasons you may have missed zakat in the past? You did not understand that you were eligible to pay zakat, right? So you've got a daughter, she's 5 years old, and you've given her some gold. So when she gets married, she's got some money, and you're accumulating some wealth for her, and it's above the nisab. Does she pay zakat on her gold? She doesn't use it, or her cash. She's got a bank account. She doesn't even know exists. Does she pay zakat on it? It's above the nisab. Well, she doesn't, but you, as a guardian, parent, you need to pay zakat on her behalf. Correct, right? But let's say it wasn't paid for you because your parents thought, oh, children don't pay zakat. You heard some fatwa saying, oh, that children, only after the age of 18 is zakat is due upon a person. Zakat is doesn't determine, it's not dependent on your age, right? Zakat is dependent on whether you've got above the nisab and the whole, right? So yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's why sometimes we miss the cut because we didn't know we had it, or we didn't know we were supposed to pay it when I was in high school. I was 15, studying in year 9. I had this money on me. I had this cash on me. I had this. I didn't know how to pay zakat on it. So yeah, that's one reason why you might have to. You forgot. One year you were just so busy with life. You were traveling. You were overseas. You weren't really attached to the masjid, so you didn't hear the reminders, and you missed a year of zakat. Right? And you paid, but possibly not as enough as you because you miscalculated. So you didn't realize that my crops were 5%. I thought it was 2.5%. So you go back and calculate Mr. Zakat. So there's many reasons why. And you didn't consider things like redraw accounts, tax money received, rental bonds return, other things that you didn't know was zakatable. So for bank mortgage statement or mortgage payments, you sometimes have an offset redraw account, right? And you could have $50,000 sitting in there. Is that zakatable? It is because you have access to it, right? It's just another savings account in disguise. The bank likes you to keep as a security for them, right? But it's just no different to a savings account. Yeah, I mean, because it's precise, it's best to calculate it because again, it forces us to be mindful of it. So if it doesn't happen in the future. So, but generally, like someone might like if you got the ability and you know, like I know of roughly it's going to equate to about $3,500. I estimate it, but you got the money to pay for, so you just pay your pool, right? And you know that I missed 4 years, so look, every year I'll just pay four just to catch, so I can catch up. It's probably better to do that, so you're safer. Um, Other reasons you may have missed your zakat as a teenager, you had enough money, but you didn't know that zakat was due about it, or you didn't think about it. A student at university, may have incorrectly assumed that you didn't have to pay due to a student loan. You might think that student loan is short term, so you kept deducting it, but student loans are long term. It comes out of your pay anyway with a hex, right? Um, and you may have just been unsure whether you pay on jewelry or not because you thought that you didn't have to pay it. Hello, alam, right? Many reasons. And for elderly, you don't know if you had to pay on a pension. Your spouse may have been calculating it incorrectly. So, which is why for sisters, you should be in control of that state. It's a pillar of worship that we're all going to be asked about our own finances. So it's important for us to kind of consider the implications if we're being too lax with this. Oh, and then sometimes you may have not distinguished between personal and business assets correctly, right? So you may have thought, okay, no, this is um, I'm using this car for work. In fact, it's a car that you're buying and selling, but because it's in the car yard and you need a lift to go home, you used it, but it's just a one-off thing. That doesn't disqualify it from being a zakatable asset. So you miscalculated. So there's many reasons you could have missed the paying zakat on certain assets. If you have been using zakat anniversary based on the Gregorian calendar, you need to well, yeah, you got to make sure that's on a lunar calendar because it's not every 12 months in the lunar Gregorian calendar. It's every 12 months on the lunar calendar. Because then you will start missing zakat then, right? Your calculations will be incorrect. So I'm not sure about that one. The 0.057%, where did that come from? If you have been using 2.5% as a zakat rate, then you have missed zakat. Estimate the total zakatable assets for all years and calculate 0.057%. I need to check that. I have a thing there's a typo there. Yeah, I mean 5775 might have been swapped around, and I have a feeling there's a typo there. I'll have to double check that. Because sometimes someone else edits the slides. I've saved a copy for myself so it doesn't get mixed up. So there's a few extra slides in there with other verses, which I thought it would make the session go much longer than the time I have for today. So yeah, if you've missed zakat for only some years of your life, again, identify which years, right? Calculate the net total of your zakat assets by subtracting any outstanding liabilities at that time. It can be complicated sometimes, looking back 3 years, 5 years ago. If the net total is equal to or above the nisab of that date, pay zakat at 2.5%. And the previous year's missed zakat can be deducted from the following years. Right? So again, like if you get an audit from the ATO, you're going to get stressed and you're going to have to go look at your books the last couple of years. Same thing in here, like it's going to be more complicated to go and do this. But again, at the end of the day, it's an obligation on us. So just because something's hard doesn't mean we think, oh, and you might think, well, look, I'm in a better situation now. I don't think it's going to be possible for me to calculate, but I have a rough idea and I'm just going to overestimate and pay. Again, so you can either go down into the nitty gritty and work out the exact amount. But if you don't mind paying extra, it's safer to do that. The idea is this is going to engage you in some activity and some work to do, right? If you do have an overdue zakat or missed zakat. So zakat that is due from past days of being non-practicing, that still needs to be paid. Zakat that is due upon a person who has passed away, and the zakat in that case needs to be paid before the inheritance. If the inheritance has already been divided, then the debt remains on the inheritors. At the end of the day, it's a debt to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's a right of the poor and needy and the recipients. Yeah. Zakat that is lost forever, that has lost before it has been given. It should be given again and remain the debt until it is done so. So you had the money, you could have paid it, but now you lost the money. Well, you still had to pay that year. So you have to find a way to pay it. Right? Which is scary, isn't it? Because your circumstances can change. Now you struggle. Like you might not be able to find a job, or living standards have changed, or you might have gone through some injury where you can't work like you used to, right? So that's why it's very important to be very timely with this and make sure that it doesn't snowball and get out of hand. So yeah. I mean, imagine a revert at the age of 70 having to kind of look through his accounts for the last thing is when you enter Islam, all your past is forgiven. It's a clean slate, right? And that would discourage people from becoming Muslim, you know? It's like, oh, well, now that I have to, I just became Muslim and I've got half $500,000 in zakat for the last 10. Yeah. So subhanAllah, yeah, it's not strict in the sense, yeah. Islam again, it's compassionate, there's mercy in everything that we see within the way the zakat is in Islam. That pretty much brings us to the end of the presentation. The last session only goes for a couple of minutes, and it's just a quick overview. And I'm sure Ismail has gone through this, but if anyone hasn't attended these in the past, who are the NZF? Who is the National Zakat Foundation, right? So we were established in 2013 after seeing a need in the community for zakat. We work on 5 key pillars. So we look at zakat in 5 key pillars. The first one is zakat awareness, raising the awareness of zakat as a pillar of Islam and a necessity. Zakat education, which is workshops like this. Zakat education, educating the community. Number 3 is zakat calculation, helping Muslims calculate the zakat properly, whether you pay it to us or not. We're a service that aims to assist in the collection in the calculation of zakat. Number 4 is zakat collection, so we also collect zakat. And number 5 is zakat distribution. So we have a team across Australia that works in the space of assisting Muslims around Australia across the 8 categories of zakat, and we focus primarily locally, right? So there's many charities that are working overseas, sending their money overseas, but our vision is driven by the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and to make sure that we can create an environment for the Muslim community that where our zakat can transformatively impact Muslims in Australia. So we're across 6 different countries. UK has been the longest. UK right now gets about 9,000 applications per month for zakat. 9,000 applications per month, right? The need in the UK is massive. They don't have the same support systems like us. with Centrelink and so on, right? In Australia, Canada, it's been 13 years, Netherlands, 6 years, New Zealand, 3 years, and Germany, 3 years. No one disputes the need for overseas. We know that definitely there's a massive need overseas. And we partner with many charities to help send money overseas when it comes to sadaqah. But for zakat, I think there is a time we're living in now where we do need to kind of raise awareness about the need. And I give the example to masjids where if someone wants to walk into the masjid right now and qualifies as one of the 8 and says, I need help, do we have the facility and the capacity to even assist these people? Right? Yet we claim to be upholding the 5 pillars, but we've made the masjid a place of salah only. And salah and zakat, like I said, it's the reason that they're always connected in the Quran, right? 28 times. So we need to have infrastructure where someone comes in, we can support it. And that's what NZF does. We work with masjids around the country where, look, we've got the funds. We don't necessarily want every masjid to donate and send their zakat to us. But we hope that people do pay zakat locally when they see the need for it. But when we work with different masjids and we've given them the ability and trained them on how to assess the need for zakat, how to collect zakat, think of it like a government grant system. These charities out there with the Catholic Church, they give out grants for different beneficiaries for different needs, right? People apply for it, there's a process, they go to the church, they get support. We didn't even have that infrastructure set up in the Muslim community within Australia. And that's one thing NZF hopes to achieve, to connect the community, to connect the masajids, right? So that we can be in a position to help the Muslims around who are in need. Again, all 4 madhabs agree that local people need to be helped first. Some of the benefits, I look at the numbers. So since we started, we've had 27,566 cases. I believe that's gone up quite significantly because Ramadan, we've got a lot of cases this year already. So this is about 10 days old, this slide set. So definitely it's actually gone up quite higher. The amount we've distributed is about 26.6 million. And right now we have 22,216 active zakat payers across Australia. How do we work? Again, we always talk about the need for it, and we always give this example. What if it was someone you knew? What if it was your grandchild, or what if it was your child that's in need? We've had examples of cases of medical emergencies where people didn't have access to funds and they were in need. They might have been wealthy or they might have been okay, but something's happened. They're in need, right? Someone's traveling here, might be okay, but they're in need, right? The stories I can go through are endless. Right? We had a situation about 5 weeks ago. Westmead Hospital gave us a call and said, we need you to come and collect this body and organize a funeral for her. It was a 12-year-old girl from Syria. She only had a mum and dad with her here. They only arrived recently. And we double-checked and verified they had no one in the community. Had no money. Who's going to do the janazah? Who's going to get their funeral set up and give them a dignified ending? Right? That's just one case, right? We had a brother who was couch surfing at different friends' houses because he became Muslim, he was 18 years old, and he was kicked out of his house. Who's going to support this brother, right? We had 3 Gazans in our office recently, and the sister, interesting situation. And this shows you why we really need to pull up our game when it comes to zakat and zakat awareness within Australia. This sister had arrived from Gaza with 4 children. Husband passed away, right? One of her sons injured during leaving Gaza. As a result, a lot of hospital, a lot of medical appointments. She has to send them to and from school, struggling to make ends meet. But she's very highly qualified. She was a radiologist in Gaza, in the hospital. She knew how to operate the different machines, the ultrasounds, all of the different X-ray machines and so on and whatnot. Highly qualified. Why can't she get a job here? Right? What problems does she have? Certifications not recognized, no one to guide her through the process. English might not be the best, right? And the brother that brought these sisters and the brothers to our office has been here for about 10 years now, and he fled in 2016. But now, alhamdulillah, he's quite well off and he's been helping all of the Gazans that are coming from overseas. He's our point of contact with that community. And this brother was telling us, and we've seen this firsthand. One of the brothers had a cross, because we only found out when he made sajda, he fell out. Asked him, why are you wearing a cross for? So we'll wrap up after this. Why are you wearing a cross for? He said, because they've promised me that they'll get me a job, a car, everything, set me up for life, right? So I'm only showing it just so I can get that support, right? They've got infrastructure, systems that will support people. And he was telling me, this brother, that all of the Gazans that are coming from overseas right now that are Christian, within a month, they've all got jobs, they've got a house, a roof over their head, they've all got a car. Why can't we do that with our community? If we want to be like the Ansar, when these people are coming overseas, we have no infrastructure set up for them. They should have a pathway to employment, upskilling program. Who's going to pay for that? Right? Employment support, upskilling, certifications. This is part of the process of getting people self-sufficient. She's qualified. She can't get a job. Right? So what is she resorting to? How is she getting by? And zakat is not meant to be a one-off thing. We don't just give you a fish. We teach you how to fish. Right? The zakat is meant to be transformative. And again, it's the prophetic way, a generational change program. So we've got a lot of different programs, from orphans to widows, to domestic violence, right? NZF is working across different parts, really making an impact on the community. And we thank you guys for your support, having us here today. Yeah, a few more stats, how many people we've helped from the Gaza program. Sorry, let's go back. Who's our competitors? Last slide. Within this space, who's our competitors in Australia? Just generally, anyone within the Muslim space. Muslim Aid, Sadaqah Welfare, Human Appeal, they're not our competitors. Right? They're our partners. These are our competitors. Right? Because they're the only ones doing what we're doing. These guys give us a call and saying, get your act together, basically. They got Muslims applying to these places. They go to the Salvation Army, they'll go to these places, and they're the ones that will say that we'll get you a job, we'll get you that. But they come with the Bible in one hand. Right? So these are our competitors. Right? And this really reframes the way we think about zakat. Right? Yes, overseas, all these other organizations, may Allah bless them, but it's all for helping overseas. These guys are helping people locally, and we have nothing equivalent to it except for the NZF. All right, from an asylum team to zakat payer, we've got zakat collection services across Australia, and there's our different offices. So any questions, we can maybe do after Salah. Yep, because you need to make it there. Yeah. ولقولي هذا واستغفر الله ولكم واستغفر انه هو الغفور الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله